The following podcast is offered freely through the Insight Meditation Community of Washington and by Jonathan Foust. To learn more or to make a donation to support this work, please go to www.jonathanfoust.com.
A new rabbi comes to a well-established congregation. Every week on the Sabbath, a fight erupts during the service. When it comes to recite I think it's the Shema, is that how it's pronounced? The Shema prayer? The Shema prayer. Half the congregation stands and the other half sits. The half who stand say, of course we stand for the Shema. It's the credo of Judaism. Throughout history, thousands of Jews have died with the words of the Shema on their lips. The half who remain seated say, no, according to the code of Jewish law, if you are seated when you get the Shema, you remain seated. The people who are standing yell at the people who are sitting, stand up. While the people who are sitting yell at the people who are standing, sit down. It's destroying the decorum of the whole service, and it's driving the new rabbi crazy. Finally, it's brought to his attention that there's an old man, 98 years old, living in a old folks' home nearby, who was one of the founding members of the congregation. So, according to the Talmudic tradition, the rabbi appoints a committee, a member who's for, against, and himself, and they go to visit this old man. And as soon as they arrive in his room, the man who's in favor of standing rushes over and says, don't you remember the tradition with the Shema that everyone stands? And the old man says, no, that wasn't the tradition. So the other guy comes running over and says, well, it wasn't tradition that everyone would sit? And the old man goes, no, that wasn't the tradition. And then the rabbi finally gets angry. He says, we got to solve this. Choose one or the other. Do you realize how crazy it's getting? We got half the congregation standing, sit down, the other half yelling, stand up. And the old man goes, yes, that was the tradition. There's a lot of controversy around meditation. Different traditions will tell you different things, and some traditions will tell you quite emphatically that theirs is the right way to practice. Meditate with your eyes open, with your eyes closed, do particular mantras, different ways of focusing your attention. I can't answer definitively what the best technique is, but I can testify to the power of practice and how your practice becomes refined as you engage into it. I've noticed in my life and kind of the blessing of my life of supporting people in their practice, this tradition of waking up and working intensively with people, that many, many people are gaining tremendous benefit from practice. There's feeling less anxiety, they're feeling more creativity, they're feeling a lot more ease in their life. What I'd like to talk about tonight are four things. First is about the call to practice. What actually it calls you to pause and slow down and pay attention. What is that? A little bit about where we start. Where do we start when it comes to engaging into spiritual practice? And third, what happens when you engage into practice? And then finally, a little bit on the discipline of practice, on observances and restraints, and an invitation for you, if you feel drawn to actually take on a specific practice for 30 days. A while back, an executive of a big corporation contacted me, and he said he wanted some one-on-one training and meditation. I said, why? What's the impulse? And he said, well, 20 years ago, I said to myself, when I'm making this much money, I'll be happy. I'm making this much money and I'm not happy. There's got to be something else going on. To some degree, we all get in our lives that this life is fleeting. We see people get old and sick and die, or we get sick and we get old, and we manage to avoid the fact that this life is imbued with impermanence. And we are generally looking for anything to soothe our anxiety, which is usually around holding on to a tightly held narrative or a story of who we are, about pursuing some dream we have of what's going to make us happy, and avoiding certain things in our life that have caused us pain. And yet there's something inside us that calls us to just to pause and to really pay attention and to really look deeper at our lives. My own call to practice started very early, and I was very, very blessed. I was raised a Quaker, which is a very contemplative tradition, with a lot of language about the still small voice within and about, finding your conscience and so forth. But I found it very frustrating because there was never any real exploration of how you did that, just a lot of words about it. I went off to prep school when I was 13 to a boarding school, and I had my first yoga class. And at the end of that yoga class, during the Yoga Nidra, the guided meditation, I had just a very powerful shift in my awareness where I could sense that my awareness was something vaster than who I was. A little bit after that, as this was the 70s, I did a little chemical research, which also opened up my mind a little bit. And right after that, I learned mantra meditation. I learned transcendental meditation, which was quite powerful for me. And I recognized almost immediately that this was something that I would be engaged in for the rest of my life. And I found some friends I could practice with. We did, in TM, you do 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon. So we would practice together, and it made a huge difference for me. All through college, I ended up finding a farm. We were all meditating together and running a farm. In the Peace Corps, I found sitting groups or formed a sitting group that kept me inspired. And after a long story I won't go into of trying to cross the Sahara Desert on my bicycle and not making it, I ended up literally stumbling into an ashram for lunch and stayed for 24 years. And back then in the ashram, the message was, if you are serious about spiritual practice, we will make room for you. So I was surrounded by depth practitioners. Just an incredible blessing in my life to be able to practice so intensively in a monastic setting. But I think we all have that call. We all have something that is drawing us to a deeper understanding of reality. We see impermanence everywhere we look. We see greed, we see hatred, we see confusion. We experience that, but also we live in a very confused time. That call to practice is a call to clarity. So there are many different traditions. There's one school of thought which says, look at life as everything is part of you. In Sanskrit, it's called tattvamasi. This too is me. You look for the interconnectedness of everything. Whole completely other tradition, it's called neti neti. I am not that. I am not this thought. I am not this body. Another way of training your attention. So many paths, so many techniques. Perhaps the greatest teachers are the experience of the heavenly messengers when you're touched by sickness, old age, and death. I've always noticed for myself times when a very good friend of mine would die, that there would be a very sharp awakening, a clarification of a recognition that my time here is limited, and kind of a whole values clarification, and a new sense of how I wanted to move forward. And I'd feel that clarity for a while, and then it would begin to fade. And I'd sort of fall back into the trance of someone on his way somewhere. So the question is, how do we stay awake in a world that is so busy and calling our attention away from looking to see clearly? There, in some scripture, in some tradition, I can't remember which one, it says that to take human form is extraordinarily rare. To take human form and to hear the Dharma, or the Dharma can be eternal truth, some eternal truth. To be alive and hear the Dharma, very rare. To be alive in a body, to hear the Dharma, and to contemplate the teachings, extraordinarily rare. And to hear the Dharma, contemplate the teachings, and practice is one of the most rare things there is. So when you feel the call, where do you start? And in ancient times, you started with what was local, with what was available. Many of the practices that are out there now everywhere were hidden. There was a very, very clear distinction for a very long time between the monastic tradition and the household tradition. In the householder tradition, you're raising your family, you're living in the world, commitments, responsibilities. The monastic tradition was all about disengaging from life and doing kind of the deep inner work. So a very clear distinction between the two. And there's something quite extraordinary around kind of these secret esoteric practices that are now freely available that I really believe have kind of merged the monastic and the householder traditions. That if you are really interested in practice, there are so many resources out there. It's really quite extraordinary. So when we start practice, I was thinking about this, like, where do we start? And I found this line from a movie you may recognize, where one of the characters says, "First wash all car, then wax on." Hey, why do I have to? Remember deal, no questions. Yeah, but height. Wax on left hand, wax on, wax off. Breathe in through nose, out of mouth. Wax on, wax off. Don't forget to breathe, very important. And he walks away. Wax on, wax off. Generally, when we begin a meditation practice, we start with concentration practice. Learning how to sustain your attention in the here and now. It's challenging and it doesn't really make much sense. In this tradition, in the insight or Vipassana tradition, we use the body as the tool, as the senses. The senses only live in the here and now. When you're feeling your breath, when you're experiencing sound vibration, when you can feel the tingling in your palms, you're here, you've arrived. And you start over again and again and again. You come back again, again, and again. There's a willful quality to it, there's an effort quality to it, and you're literally training your mind how to stay. throughout my life, I've studied lots of yoga. I've studied other martial arts. I studied Tai Chi for a certain while. And Tai Chi, as you know, has got a lot of soft, flowing motions. And what you're practicing doesn't seem related to anything practical whatsoever. But I'd heard stories of some students who said that they got into some situation and something about the practice just sort of kicked in, even though it was never expressly about any kind of martial art or anything like that. So I kind of continued with my practice of going through these Tai Chi forms. And this is many, many years ago, really early in the morning in Western Massachusetts. I was walking down the road in the pitch dark, hoping to get somewhere by sunrise so I could do some photography. So I'm walking down this road. It's a paved road. Really pitch dark. I'm pretty comfortable walking in the dark. And I almost bumped into a deer. And the sound a deer makes when it's frightened, that kind of the call, and then the clattering of the hooves. And I couldn't believe it. In the pitch dark, I suddenly, I went into some like martial arts form. And it was really ridiculous standing there in the pitch dark with a deer I couldn't see, in a martial arts form. But there was the practice. It just kicked right in, this defensive posture where I could move however I needed to. In that same way, when you engage into a concentration practice, into a sense-based practice, you might be surprised of how you may be entraining your mind in a way to help you shift from your story and your reaction to actually being present, where you might be more responsive. Certainly many people have reported that rather than a reactive pattern, somehow something has shifted where they actually feel present to it rather than frozen. So the practice is about being right now, being in the present. You might like to, maybe just for a few moments, you can close your eyes. And just notice the effect as you take 3 slow, deep breaths. Notice where you feel the breath. Take a moment to shift your attention to the experience of the sound vibrations. Let your attention flow into your palms and fingers and thumbs, and just for a moment or two, contact any sense of aliveness here. This remembering of here and now is, in many ways, the essence of the practice, of shifting from the cognitive to the experience of here and now. So you might deepen the breath a little bit. If you like, you can open your eyes or feel free to remain with them closed. Concentration is a foundation of meditation. Learning how to sustain attention on purpose. Very, very helpful practice. It's not the whole of the practice, but it's a very important part to cultivate. The more you can concentrate, the more you can calm yourself when the mind's naturally disturbed. It can lead into powerful insights of recognizing beliefs, recognizing your patterns of how you navigate through your life. And we'll certainly talk more about some of the other applications. Our natural reactive instinct is to look for happiness outside ourselves. That there is something out there that's going to complete us. And certainly to avoid unpleasant experiences. The Buddha, in his awakening, recognized that everyone was looking for happiness in exactly the wrong way. By looking outside and having it be based on senses is kind of a setup for ongoing dissatisfaction. While the true sense of happiness is cultivating a sense of presence internally regardless of the externals. So there's something very powerful about training yourself to come back to the here and now. Another part of a practice is really assessing in your life your actions. What are the actions and habits that cultivate a more wholesome state? And what are the actions and the habits that cultivate a less than wholesome state? And paying attention to those. So just briefly, it's interesting to note what happens when you practice. I know many of us have been practicing for a while. Who has felt your life improve in some way through your meditation practice? That's great. And those who haven't aren't here. But I noticed for myself that when I started to practice at age 15, with all the angst of being 15 years old, pretty dramatically I started to feel less anxious. I started to feel more creative. I started to feel more comfortable in my own skin. And many people have shared the benefits of the practice with me over the years. And generally there's something about less anxiety, kind of less wound up in fear. And for the last 8 years, I've led a program called A Year of Living Mindfully, which is about 35 people who commit to a year of a regular practice and retreats and one-on-one exploration and so forth. There's a lot of amazing transformation in that program. And someone would share with me not too long ago, they said, it's like there are old parts of me now that no longer fit. And maybe you've noticed that in your practice, that as you begin to really relax and pay attention, that there are some old patterns, old habits that they're no longer a match. And certainly what I find that many people share is that old fears and anxieties don't have the same grip. And that the old dreams, that they're not quite as compelling as they were either. Oftentimes friendships change. And it's interesting to reflect on how your life has changed through your practice. Or even in just this last hour, what might have shifted just from pausing and slowing down. From my transcendental meditation days, I was a transcendental meditation maniac for quite a while. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who founded it, said, he said to me, it's so cliche, but it's so true. He would say, water the root and enjoy the fruit. And that's what I found when you engage in a practice. When you water the root, that is to say, when you deeply relax and you just pay attention, it's as if everything gets nourished through this very, very simple practice. It's so simple. Relax and pay attention. Not to get too woo-woo, but I really feel that when you go into a practice where you're actively disengaging from the habitual thoughts, the habitual patterns, when you begin to sense what's more possible in your life, something changes vibrationally. There's a wild little woo-woo term out there of like, things that were a vibrational match are no longer a vibrational match for you. And many people say, the people who I used to hang out with, it just doesn't feel as comfortable anymore. Or, I used to go to movies, watch a lot of movies. It's just not that satisfying for me anymore. So it's an interesting thing to be aware of what might shift externally in your life as you're practicing internally. So I'd like to talk a little bit about an invitation to practice. There are so many different techniques, so many different traditions. But I'd like to share with you an invitation to practice kind of what I'm calling one observation and one restraint. When I started practicing TM, Transcendental Meditation, 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon, I was committed to practice and stay with it. I did that for about 15 years until I moved into the ashram, and then my practice changed. I went for long periods where I never missed a meditation. And what that meant was I would meditate in parked cars, I would meditate on a park bench pretending I was reading, I would pretend I would be sleeping, but I'd be meditating. I had to go through some effort to make it happen. The benefit was extraordinary. In spiritual practice, you can say that an observance is formally taking on a practice that you sense will be enlivening for you. Something that's going to give you a little more energy. Now, on the other hand, another way of practicing is through the practice of restraint. Something you decide you're not going to do as a way of just noticing what will happen if I don't do this as a spiritual practice. So if you go on a retreat, we have a retreat coming up in a couple of weeks, and for 1 week, you'll restrain from speaking. You'll restrain from making eye contact. You'll restrain from reading and from writing. Then you pay attention to what it's like to refrain from those activities. It can be quite powerful. You take habitual activities, you refrain from them, then you pay attention. It's an extraordinary practice. So I'd like to invite you, if you're interested, into taking on a 30-day practice of one observation and one restraint. And I've got a handout for you and some suggestions. I'd like to talk a little bit about it. So when it comes to keeping your practice alive, it's important to keep getting clever about it, because the practice can become very, very rote and stale after a while. Has anyone noticed that? Hard to keep a practice going. So when I lived in the ashram, we were always looking for ways that we could stay inspired. What I'm committing to for 30 days is my practice is pretty well established. So the observation I'm taking on, and we're also doing this in the Year of Living Mindfully for the next month, is I'm taking on a 7-minute high-intensity workout every day. Have you ever seen the 7-minute workout? I'll send a link. It's in the New York Times. Or these if you do them every day, they kind of hit your core muscles. They're like doing the plank and squats and push-ups and stuff like that. So every day I'm going to do that. I've done it before, but it's slacked off. So I want to do it for 30 days and see what it's like. So I'm 2 days into it, a little sore from the push-ups, doing the plank is not as easy as it used to be when I did it on a regular basis. So, but I know in 30 days, I'm going to feel really strong. The restraint, the thing I'm not going to do. I get goosebumps. No coffee. Notice I didn't say no caffeine. I put away my grinder. I put away my AeroPress. The coffee grounds I had left, they're packed up tightly. They're in the freezer. I'm stepping away from coffee for a month. And now that I'm kind of into it, 2 days, I'm actually looking at getting off caffeine completely for some period during this month. And it's something I've known I should do because I get a little too wired. I get hooked into the stimulant. And my toleration has gotten really, really high. So this is going to be an interesting way to kind of like break the cycle and see what happens. It's been years since I've been off caffeine, so I'd like to experience that. So different people choose different practices. Some people have decided that their restraint that they're practicing is just to cut out one food. Someone has said that their practice is for a month they're not going to talk about anyone unless they're present in the room with them. I think that was kind of cool. For others, there are other habits. There's someone who said that their restraint is they're not going to touch their electronic device until 8 in the morning. For someone else, it's like after 8 at night, no media. Someone else said Sunday, media-free day. That's their practice for the month. So it's an interesting reflection. In terms of practice, many people are choosing to do a meditation practice, to do 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day. Other people are choosing to take on, doing some yoga every day. Anything you might sense as a healthy habit you might like to take on. So what's interesting is when you choose just one thing, one observation, or one restraint, something the founding guru of the ashram where I lived, he said, when you see a garland of flowers, if you pick up just one flower, the entire garland comes with it. So you may find just through one practice that it may affect you in ways you had not quite expected. So before we close in the next couple of minutes, I'd like to, I'll guide you through a little reflection. If this is something you're drawn to, what would be one practice you could commit to for 30 days? And what's one restraint you might like to practice, for 30 days? Then the question becomes, how do you keep it going? It's easy to start, but challenging to keep it going for 30 days. So there are 2 suggestions I have, and we'll have a handout for you if you're interested. And again, only if you're interested. One way that's very effective is very analog, and you may have heard of it as the Seinfeld technique, or Jerry Seinfeld, where he knew that at some point in his career, if he was going to be successful, he had to write every day. So what he did is he got a big calendar and he put a big red X for the day that he wrote. And he put the calendar where he could see it. And the idea is you want to keep the visual chain going. You don't want to break the chain. So one of the handouts I have for you is a calendar. And you can put in one color for your observation, another color for your restraint. And that can be a helpful way to do it. So that's one thing that'll be helpful. The second, which is a little more complicated, but maybe more effective, and that is to find a partner. Either someone who's also interested in doing it or someone who's willing to support you. And having some accountability will be really helpful. So if you can find a partner, somebody be willing to support you, what I would most recommend is that you send a daily email, and just in the subject line, you write down what you did or your observations, and your partner has no obligation to respond, but they will notice. That's kind of the easiest way to do it. The second is if you can find a partner and then schedule some times, like once a week, where you just, in addition to the email, where you just touch base. This was really hard. This is my success. This is what I'm noticing. As the saying goes, company is stronger than willpower. Finding someone who might support you could be could be very, very helpful. So I personally I'm really excited about my 30 days, because I know if I can do this in 30 days, I'll feel stronger, I'll feel more flexible from my observation, and I'll be able to have said I was off coffee for a whole month, with whatever benefits come along with that as well. So I know our time is tight, but I'd like to lead a short reflection, just to sense what might intrigue you. So if you like, you can close your eyes. You might just take a moment to make contact with your breath. And you might sense, is there one observation, one practice that you feel drawn to experimenting with? Just one thing you might do on a daily basis that you can realistically commit to, that would support you in some way. As you reflect on the restraint, is there something that intrigues you that you might refrain from for 30 days? It might be a food or a substance. It might be a habit. It might be a pattern that you'd like to bring more attention to. And is there someone that might be a support person for you? Is there a sense of what might most support you in sustaining these practices? And is there a sense of what would be most helpful for you? A daily email or a weekly email or scheduling a call? So when you're ready, you can deepen the breath. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So I'm curious, who's interested in taking on a 30-day practice? Wonderful. That's great. And is there anyone who would maybe need a buddy? If so, when maybe we're going to have tea and cookies afterward. You can mill around and look for a partner. If you need a partner, send me an email. We'll help you get connected. It's a very, very helpful thing. One thing I'd like to mention, we have just a few minutes left, is I know quite a few people who have had a strong desire to have a daily meditation practice and find it really, really challenging. And I'm wondering, Mo, are you here? Would you mind just coming up and just saying a few words about your offering? Mo had this brilliant idea. Mo's done the Year of Living Mindful. He's also one of the founders of the Leadership Conference coming up. And he put together this amazing thing called Telesanga that's touched a whole lot of people. If you mind maybe just a headline around what it's been like.
Thank you, Jonathan. I wasn't really prepared to speak about Telesanga, and just really happy to be back here. When I first got into meditation, it was about 6 years ago. I was going to the church here and just stumbled upon this class. And so just really, really grateful for everything you do. Thank you, Jonathan. And Telesanga, just to give you guys a quick sense about what it's all about, and I'm a little bit nervous because I wasn't really prepared. But, oh, I'm sorry, can you hear me better now? So basically, I struggled once I experienced the benefits of meditation to get my daily practice going. And the only time I would actually meditate daily was when I'd go on retreat and someone would ring a bell, we'd all get together in a meditation hall and meditate. And so I created Telesanga trying to simulate that. And what happens is that when you sign up, your phone rings at a set time each morning or evening, depending on what time you sign up for. 10 other people who have also signed up for that same time, their phones ring. You're all connected together. Everyone meditates together. Your progress is tracked electronically, and you receive an email every week showing if you're able to keep your commitments or not. And so you meditate together in community. There's 5:30, 6 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock, 7:30 class, 10:30 p.m. Sessions as well. So if you're interested, it's telasangha.com, or come talk to me afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. It's such a gift, and it's offered by donation, and just a real powerful thing. I know a number of people who have found establishing a practice through Telasangha, and then realized that they wanted to prepare themselves more for the meditation. So the half hour before, they would do yoga. So when the phone rang, they felt they were really ready, and it just really enriched their practice. So thank you, Mo, for creating that. It's had inestimable impact for so many people. So that's available for you. We have some handouts at the back. If you would like one, you don't feel obligated to take one. It's got a little bit of an overview of the support, and then it's got a calendar in the back. And there'll be a downloadable kind of PDF calendar in an email that I'll send out afterward. And before we close, Sarah Ellen, you wanted to say a little bit about the Labyrinth Walk coming up.
Thanks. Good evening. This coming Sunday, I'd like to invite each and every one of you to come to the Labyrinth Walk that will take place right behind us in the Fellowship Hall from 3 to 6. There are flyers in the back. Just a quick reminder, the Labyrinth is an ancient spiritual tool, great for meditating mindfulness, relaxation, and gaining insight. We're also introducing meditative dancing, and we'll be doing that from 4 to 5. We'll be doing the meditative dancing in the style of sacred circle dancing, and we have the foremost sacred circle teacher in the area coming to teach us on Sunday. So again, this coming Sunday from 3 to 6, and flyers are in the back. Thanks.
And just one more quick announcement before we end. And that is, you may be familiar, or you may know that they're installing the new senior minister, Reverend Aaron. And part of the theme that the church is developing and really bringing forward is the concept of church without walls. And so we'll have 2 talks coming up. One will be a talk I'll be giving about how to live in the world from a place of service. And when I'm away on retreat, we'll have Trudy Mitchell-Gilkey will be kind of doing a follow-up talk as well. So there's a lot happening here at the church in regard to that as well. Why don't we close our eyes for a brief yet short meditation? And again, you might just let your attention drift inward to contact the breath. And feel the aliveness of sound, this felt sense of here and now. And you might take just a moment at the end of this evening to wish yourself well as you sense your path, your practice. Imagine a sense of ease, of well-being, opening up inside. You might bring into mind any in your life that may be struggling at this time, and just take a moment just to wish them well. to sense both the limitlessness of awareness and the limitlessness of the heart. And when you're ready, you can deepen the breath, let the eyes open.